Hello, welcome in. It's Dubs OT with JD, and it's a Greg Silver night here on this Saturday as the Warriors win. That's right. The Warriors win in Minnesota. They beat the Timberwolves for the second time in under 2 weeks as they win at Target Center tonight. Final of 113 to 103 in favor of the Warriors. And the Warriors did it with a defensive identity playing in this game without Draymond Green. A lot to get into, some tough closing lineup decisions for Steve Kerr. There was a massive blown lead lost in this game. Warriors were up by 21 and then ended up trailing by 1 at different junctures of the game. But the Warriors able to do enough down the stretch to earn a win as they outscore the Timberwolves 34-28 in the fourth quarter to win this one by a 10-point margin. So, a lot to get into. Steph Curry, amazing down the stretch. See, the Warriors can win a close game, Greg. They can win a close game. They can finish a close game. It just has to be completely dominated by defense and completely dominated by Stephen Curry taking over the game, making every shot in an otherworldly Steph Curry performance. But we're live here on YouTube only for this Saturday. And good to be with you, Greg. What's up, brother?
Yeah, good to be with you. Glad the Warriors were able to get that one because I was not ready to spend a Saturday night talking about another, what would have been 10 out of 12 losses. So they're able to break it a little bit. Minnesota's actually been a pretty similar team this year in terms of energy can be lacking. Offensively, they've really struggled. Still pretty good defensively. We can get into a lot of it. I will be honest, though, because that's what I am. I'm honest. I don't know if that game made me feel much better about the Warriors. Now, when you're in a game like this and you're in a losing patch like this, you got to find ways to win games. And when you see how tight the Western Conference standings are already at this point in the season, they all count. So I'm not acting like it means nothing. However, I've been on record saying this year's Warriors are not last year's Warriors, and I mean that because they do defend at a much better level. However, these Warriors are also very much last year's Warriors right now in that you need Steph Curry to kind of be the guy down the stretch, and we'll see where it goes with Schroeder as he adjusts into this offense. I know it's only his second full game, and the Memphis game hardly even counted for anybody because that was over from the jump. But they're still very Steph Curry dependent. And I didn't think he looked great physically. I think he's been shooting a lot of threes, and that's sort of a sign usually that he's fatigued. I don't know if he's still working through that knee tendonitis overall. So we can get into a lot of the big picture stuff for sure. I'm not going to be a downer after a win, but I do think that kind of win, JD, and having to gut it out was very reminiscent of last year. Now, the flip side of that is Minnesota's still a good team. They went to the Western Conference Finals last year. They do defend well, and it was on the road. So you got to give the Warriors some credit for sure. But just the way they trudged through the mud in this one set off a couple of alarms for me. I got to be honest.
It's a great win because they won it. And it would have been a new rock bottom had they lost it. So I think you have to factor it in along those lines. I'm with you, though. I don't think there are a lot of grand takeaways from the way that the Warriors were able to actually win it because they do get a credit for a close game win, a clutch victory now. So you look up at the end of this thing, and the Warriors, I'm trying to find the clutch game numbers now, 8-9 in 17 clutch games. So 11 of the last 13 have been clutch games. The Warriors were 5-2 at one point, and then they lost 5 in a row, and then they won 2, and then they had lost their last 2 clutch games. So now they get one back, but 8-9 overall in 17 clutch games. So you get credit for winning a clutch game. But again, it was all defense. And look, the Warriors get a lot of credit from the jump for their defense. I guess that's a good place to start. We learned this afternoon that Draymond Green was not going to play in this one, dealing with some ankle soreness, and they weren't going to have the services of Moses Moody either. Moody had been in a situation where it looked like he was going to come back and play, listed as probable, and then that got downgraded to questionable, and then Steve Kerr announced that Moody was going to be out. But we'll set the Moody part aside of it and just start with Draymond. No Draymond immediately means Steve Kerr has a decision to make as far as his starting lineup. And Steve Kerr went defense with the starting lineup. He went, well, many, myself included, would have thought, all right, this is going to be an opportunity for Jonathan Kuminga to get back into the starting lineup in Draymond's spot and have the Warriors still be able to start a center to try and compound some of the size that the Timberwolves play with. And Steve Kerr went defense on two fronts. He went Kyle Anderson for Draymond, and he flip-flopped the centers, went to Trayce Jackson-Davis, who began the year as the Warriors starting center. And Trayce Jackson-Davis rewarded Steve Kerr tonight. He was excellent. I mean, this is the best game Trayce Jackson-Davis has played in a long time overall. But getting back to the defensive identity, I think, is the one thing, and we can quibble about best players and lineups and rotations. We'll get into the Curry rotation, which changed mid-game tonight after I had been kind of complaining about it in the first half. And because we've talked about it, I haven't loved the new Curry rotation where he plays at the beginning of each quarter and then sits out in the middle of every quarter and then comes back and finishes the end of each quarter. I got to imagine Steph Curry doesn't like it either, but give Kerr credit because it worked. He went defense off the top, Greg, and it really set the tone for the night when you look at 26-15 into the first quarter, and then the Warriors held the Timberwolves without scoring until the 5:38 mark of the second quarter on top of it.
Yeah, I definitely give Steve Kerr credit for pushing the right button with that lineup. And for his sake and the Warriors' sake, I'm glad that it ended up working out to start because that was really interesting to have Kuminga sort of get anointed as it's his time. Draymond's going to get out of the starting lineup. And then that gets featured for, 3 games? And then Draymond is hurt and Kuminga goes back to the bench and they start Kyle Anderson, who's gotten a couple of DNPs or very little NPs, LNPs with 4 minutes in a game. And glad they did it. Trayce Jackson-Davis, certainly his best game of the year. I'm in a different setting, as you see, so with a little bit of family today, and just the ranty version of Greg was coming out in the first quarter. I'm talking about TJD hasn't had the best hands this year, missed a lot of layups, and then I'm like, hey, you know what? He's starting pretty good. I like it when they make me eat my words a little bit. So he played well, and it has started well, but the way he closed was really the most impressive, and man, they needed that because Looney was steady, but he had a couple of bad sequences, and he's not going to get above the rim offensively or defensively in the same way that Trayce Jackson-Davis was able to do. So they absolutely needed that. And credit to Podziemski, too. He has not had a very good stretch of basketball, but tonight when they needed it to sort of keep them afloat and not let this lead be flip-flopping, he kind of pushed them back and kept them afloat. I thought this was one of the better Brandon Podziemski games in a season in which he struggled a lot to start the year. Yeah,
and Podziemski's starting to string it together a little bit offensively. The three-point shot has been better. I think, just seeing a couple of shots go in has helped calm him down a little bit. I mean, it seemed like he was just chasing everything. I mean, with every miss, it seems like he would take another bad shot or get caught trying not to take a bad shot, which was leading to some indecision and some bad passes as well. I mean, that sequence where he got caught in the corner going back a couple of games ago when the Warriors were home against Dallas and then ended up getting subbed out of the game. I mean, that was as bad an individual possession, I think, as any player has had this season, maybe for the Warriors. So Podziemski, coming back around, and I thought he made a case to be a part of the closing lineup down the stretch. We'll get to that coming up here on Dubs OT with JD and Greg Silver, the YouTube only edition here on this Saturday. Warriors win in Minnesota, so they've taken 2 of 3 against the Timberwolves here in the last couple of weeks. And yeah, they got a low-level Timberwolves squad. If you watch Minnesota a lot, there are games where, especially at home, the Timberwolves just come out and they're going through the motions and they get down big and a lot of times they can't find their offense. And it looked, though, Greg, and I think that worked in conjunction with Steve Kerr's decision to start the game by going defense heavy. But then it looked as if in the second quarter, as we kind of get into why things got a little bit dicey, the Warriors held the Timberwolves scoreless for more than half of the second quarter. And then the Warriors went cold and had some really bad offense themselves, went almost 4 minutes without a basket. And instead of maybe being up 25-30, they were up 14 late in the half, and it actually got, I think, whittled all the way down to 10 before Brandon Podziemski hit a big three. Podziemski had some big moment shots, times in the game where the Warriors really needed a basket to prevent things from becoming really problematic. And he was able to really provide that at different times in this game. But second quarter.
One that I really liked from Podziemski was when he had the kind of open look in the corner for the three, pump fake, dribbled in, and sort of took that floater. I don't always love the Podziemski floater, but if we're going to talk about shot selection between the three-pointer and the corner and taking that floater, getting closer to the hoop, that was a big one that kind of stuck out to me.
Yeah, and again, the second quarter looked like it was really going to maybe have the chance to bite him in the ass a little bit. And I mean, it just and we'd be talking about it. If they lose, we would have been talking about, I think, three things. It would have been failure to execute again down the stretch. I think it would have been fair or unfair Steve Kerr's rotation and lineup decisions as far as who was closing the game. I think we'd also be talking about the lineup decisions to start the game had they lost this game, because it was pretty stunning to see Kyle Anderson and Trayce Jackson-Davis get the nod, both over Jonathan Kuminga. And I do want to kind of separate that. You touched on it already. What is going on with Kuminga? Because it really is interesting how, and you use the term that I've used a lot, they anointed him as almost the new franchise player. I mean, currently, forget about 2, 3, 5 years down the line.
I probably stole it from you. We talk enough to where I probably just ripped that out of your vocabulary.
I mean, you had Draymond and Steph basically saying it's his time, and it just the whole thing just didn't add up to me. And now you've got him not starting the game tonight when Draymond's not playing, and you're putting TJD back in after he struggled. Kyle Anderson's basically been MIA, in part, I think, because Kuminga's played better up until maybe the last couple of games. He had really played well, his best basketball of the season for probably about a month. So that was leading to less Kyle Anderson. I think, and look, I've said this, the Warriors are a better team when Kyle Anderson plays more. Again, he didn't play a ton in this game tonight, only 17 minutes. But if you want, especially with Draymond Green out, to have a defensive identity, I think Kyle Anderson has to be a part of it. And let's also give some credit to Andrew Wiggins, who was really bad offensively and couldn't make a shot. 1 of 9 until he had a couple of easy ones in the final couple of minutes as the Warriors were putting the game away post Steph Curry going, absolute nuclear in the final couple of minutes. Andrew Wiggins was phenomenal tonight defensively. Phenomenal tonight. Edwards, 6 of 20. He was 1 for 9 in the first half and had 3 points, only 16 in the second half. Wiggins, I say Kyle Anderson, but Wiggins, I thought, was huge in terms of the defensive tone that the Warriors wanted to set. And then you had GP2 out there in the final couple of minutes as part of the closing lineup, which you could do because Curry was playing like 2022 NBA Finals Curry.
Yeah, and I don't think this is a hot take at this point anymore with what the team is, but Andrew Wiggins is a no-doubter closer. He's a no-doubter starter, and part of that has to do with what he is positionally. We've said it a lot. He's your only true small forward on the team. He's also one of your 5 best players, and even on a night like tonight when he was pretty atrocious offensively, stationary, not making a lot of shots, just couldn't really create for himself. Defensively, you have to have him out there. And if he plays like that defensively, you can actually live with it most nights. Now, it helped that Minnesota as a whole was struggling. If it's like the Dallas game and you get a bad offensive version of Andrew Wiggins, it's going to be tough. But for the most part, you kind of need to have him out there, regardless of just the fact that he has his position. And Papa and I have talked about this, and I'm glad that he's kind of on our side. He sort of said maybe last week, 10 days ago, they all kind of blend together at this point for me, JD, but he was saying something about how he was very adamant about not trading Andrew Wiggins because he's still your best perimeter defender. And he felt like he was the only one. And I was like, nah, dude. I was like, JD and I were on the train with you. We were very much in the don't trade Wiggins for the sake of trading Wiggins. Is he 2022 Andrew Wiggins? No. But is he a step above what he was the previous 2 years? Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think it also, works in conjunction with, you look at the going back to the Levine rumors of the last couple of days, right? The whole offseason thing of, well, you could get Zach LaVine if you would be willing to give up Andrew Wiggins. And I was quick side note on that. And you remember this because we discussed it a lot in the offseason. I would have looked at LaVine for Chris Paul's expiring contract and ancillary pieces to help make the salaries match. I was not in the Andrew Wiggins for Zach LaVine market. And as well as LaVine has played, even of late, I know there's been some reports that the Warriors have maybe changed their opinion or internally questioned whether they should have taken a closer look or a more serious look at LaVine. To me, Wiggins and the way that Wiggins has played to this point this season, that's an indicator that should have been, and correctly was, a non-starter. In terms of having Wiggins be a centerpiece of any kind of deal for LaVine. Again, we can debate the Chris Paul part and whether that would have been worth it. And I think with every loss, everything kind of had been getting relitigated. And there were some reports out today and really all week. I mean, every day the Warriors don't play, I feel like there's another rumor about what they're trying to do or won't do or unwilling to do. I mean, it's not going to stop. Maybe it slows a little bit. Maybe it slows a little bit, Greg, because they are going to be playing every other day with some back-to-backs mixed in here for really the next 2 or 3 weeks. But yeah, Wiggins is somebody that they need. And I mean, even the Jimmy Butler reporting that the Warriors, reluctant because of Butler's availability to give up Wiggins in a deal. And they'd have to give up Wiggins and obviously Kuminga in a deal to get Jimmy Butler.
Yeah, the Butler piece.
It's the Wiggins part, though. To me, the Wiggins part is the tough part of that. And as we've discussed.
Yeah, and I think I'll say this about the Warriors if I'm going to just have a little bit of my Debbie Downer moment, because I was texting you this and I said this to the TV a couple times. We kind of understand that they're still very dependent on Steph offensively. We kind of get what their identity is aspiring to be, top 5 to 7 defensive team, push the pace, all that. Now you got Schroeder as another ball handler. I'm a little bit concerned with their decision-making abilities. They do not always play like the smartest team, and I think that's why we have a nearly blown lead or a fully blown lead and a loss discussion, because the bottom line is they're just not good enough to be making poor decisions out there. And I'm talking about everything from the lack of execution offensively down the stretch of some of these games. I'm also talking about things like tonight that you can wipe away and say, oh, well, it didn't mean anything in the end. But like, they go up, what was it, 11 when Steph got it to 107 to something. And then Gary Payton II, immediate 2 fouls to get them like Timberwolves right back in it. And it's just things like that where it's like, they cannot be a team that is not top 10 in basketball IQ. And sometimes it feels like they're well outside of that. And it can't just be all on Steph offensively, obviously. Like, there's a lot of factors in the game. But the decision-making thing is more than just a recent trend. I feel like it's been a somewhat consistent pattern going all the way back to they can't even win a game on the road a couple of years ago.
Well, part of it is the fact that they're best players at times aren't the best decision makers. I mean, I think that is, Steph and Draymond at times they make some silly mistakes in terms of passes that they attempt and the like. And then I also think it gets into the whole, two-way player. If you want to say offense, defense, and basketball IQ, if you want to make that almost a third of the game, like offense, defense, and special teams, the Warriors have guys that are high IQ guys that maybe aren't quite as skilled. And then like Kevon Looney is a high IQ guy. Kyle Anderson's a high IQ guy, but Draymond and Steph obviously are as well, but a lot of the role players, those guys that are the higher IQ guys are not maybe the most skilled or talented offensive players as well. So they're not necessarily, in as many positions to make stuff happen. Whereas you could make the case that some of the lower IQ guys are guys that really, it's your Buddy Hields, who is, never met a shot he didn't like or want to take. It's Jonathan Kuminga, who at times, he will take, he gets caught in between whether he really decides I'm going to be a passer on this play. And sometimes he's a very good playmaker when he determines ahead of time he's going to be a playmaker. But for the most part, he's also somebody that gets caught in between because he really wants to look to score on a regular basis. So I think having those balanced skill sets is important, and the Warriors don't have enough, I think, players who are in the Steph Draymond category of have the skill and the IQ to the point where you can live with some mistakes from time to time, because you're going to get the high end of the basketball IQ when those guys are really clicking.
Yeah, and I know that we don't have a Sounds of Silver tonight because we do the YouTube thingy, and that's all good. I am just kind of scrubbing through some of the instant post-game reactions. Steve Kerr looks like he spent some time at the podium. I sent you this one. Interesting quote from Steve Kerr. It's important for our young players to understand we don't need contested 17-footers with 12 on the clock. That's a bad shot when you have Steph Curry on your team. Pass the ball.
Who's he talking about? The first guy that comes to mind for me is Kuminga.
I would say the one who takes the most mid-range shots. I don't think this particular quote is necessarily talking about this player, but Buddy Hield also, I got to be honest, not been in the good category of decision-making as of late. We know he's kind of a chucker. He's going to shoot it. We kind of know that he'll get picked on a little bit defensively. He started the year really good with a stretch of games. Then he hit a slump. He's probably going to have another stretch of 7 to 10 games, as you put so eloquently over a text to me, where he looks like the early version of Buddy Hield. And then he's going to have another 15 where it's not so good. So that's kind of what we're getting with the experience. But the reason I'm bringing up Buddy in particular, JD, is at the end of our show yesterday, we had Danny Emmerman on, and Papa left early. So it was just a Silver Emmerman back and forth for a good 15 minutes. And we're talking about Buddy Hield. And Danny Emmerman, who gives really good insight in general, but we're talking about Hield, and he said that they almost have to play him a good handful of minutes because part of that 12-3 start had a lot to do with the version of Buddy Hield that the Warriors were getting. And a good chunk of the slippage has had to do with the Buddy Hield they haven't been getting. They had a Splash Brothers light, a Splash Buddies as was going around, and you saw the impact when you have multiple constant perimeter threats out there. They went into Boston, had a rough first quarter, and ended up taking them down. Like, that was a big product of having multiple perimeter threats and really steady defense. And did D'Anthony Melton also miss that game, if I'm not mistaken?
Yeah, Melton came back, I think, again. He came back, I want to say, against Oklahoma City.
Yes, and started.
Yeah, and then that was when they made the decision that he was going to be the starter, and it only lasted the 2 games. They beat Oklahoma City and Dallas, and then that was it.
Right, and so for all the fuss about losing Melton, which is a big loss skill set-wise, they were doing a good chunk of damage without D'Anthony Melton as well, and I think Buddy Hield was a big part of that. You can justify having Hield out there sometimes, even if he's not shooting great, if he's holding his own somewhat defensively and making good decisions. But he's had some passes or just drop balls lately and bad defensive lapses that make it to where even if he is hitting a couple of shots, kind of hard to have him out there.
It is. I want to go back to the quote that you sent from Steve Kerr in the postgame, and you sent it via Danny Emmerman, who was in Minneapolis at Target Center. I mentioned Kuminga. I think he's also talking about Podziemski in there as well. I want to make sure that I'm being fair.
Oh yeah,
on that. I mean, really, those. I mean, it's important for our young players to understand we don't need contested 17-footers with 12 on the clock. That actually applies to Kuminga and Podziemski both. So I think wanted to make sure we acknowledged that yes. Both ways. Although tonight it did seem like it was a lot of Kuminga really was aggressive in that like mid-range game tonight. Not his best game, by the way. I know that tonight's one of those where I think the plus minus is not indicative of how he played. I think he ended up being a +5 in this one. I do think he played capable defense tonight. I thought he was energetic on that end of the court, which he isn't always. But man, he was kind of hunting tonight in an odd way. And he did have a couple. I thought the best plays he had of the night for him were the 2 fouls that he drew, where he made 3 out of the 4 free throws in a moment where the Warriors really needed a little bit of stopping the bleeding. I guess it was. That was I'm trying to find that was that in the fourth quarter? I'm looking at my notes. Where was that? He had a nice little mid-range pull-up. Then he had a horrible drive for a turnover. Then he chucked a 3. I'm trying to think. Let's see. There was the play where Podziemski should have thrown the ball to Kuminga on that fast break and then tried to take the shot. But no, fourth quarter, couple of big free throws that the Warriors needed from Kuminga. Excuse me here. Got a cough for just a second. So you take the mic for a second there, Greg.
All right. JD is going to get some cough drops and everything. Make sure he's cured. Also, just want to say what's up to everybody. This might be a decent window to go and do a little peeking in the YouTube chat. Because I got to say, JD, I'm always very pleased. Even on these nights where we're not on the radio, the YouTube, we got a good audience still. So all you out there, big thank you. And saved a couple messages. AJ Cruz, Greg Silver, 1 game at a time, young grasshopper. Yeah, I was looking very big picture early, and but I also think that Robert addressed something that I would agree with. My silver lining guy, Robert. If they lose 4 or 5 now or something like that, this game's essentially another throwaway. I'm right there with you, man. Like, this was a good win. You got to find ways to get it any way you can and just grind it out sometimes. But it's not an excuse to go back to playing careless basketball and letting this tough part of your schedule kick you in the butt here come Christmas.
No question. I mean, and look, I'm still of that, as I mentioned earlier, I don't think tonight means a lot in the big picture. Tonight is just, you stop the bleeding, you get to 15-12, and you hope you can go home and chase it with a win against Indiana Monday, and that gets you to 16-12, and then the games are really coming with the Lakers and Clippers and Suns and Cavs. And I mean, so there's no let up in the schedule here. I mean, maybe Indiana is a little bit of a let up, but given the way that they've played so far, but
they came into Chase last year and punched them in the face.
Yeah, not really. So I just don't think there's any let up in the next couple of weeks. Like, to me, it's more, let's see where this team is, January 7th. When after they play Miami and they finish up that long stretch where they're basically going to be at home. 8 of the next 9, I think, are going to be at home for the Warriors, with the 1 game in LA against the Clippers next Friday. But other than that, it's all home. 23rd, 25th, 28th, 30th, and then they've got 4 more right at the beginning of the year before they go to the East or Midwest, I think. In toward the middle of January. So to me, it's more like, where are you at the end of that homestand in terms of your overall record? And then we can maybe take a little bit more of a big picture look. But yeah, big picture in the short term, I don't think tonight means a lot, other than for one night and for 48 hours, it stops us from discussing everything that the Warriors are doing like it's just a complete and utter failure, which I think is what we've been doing for the better part of the last 3 weeks or longer. So I think there is an opportunity for everybody on that front, Greg, to kind of catch their breath. I still think there should be urgency, and this is the other one from Robert on the YouTube chat that struck me. This game doesn't change the fact that they need to make a big splash by New Year's, 0 point in waiting another second if they want to be serious about this season. I agree with that. I do not think that the Warriors can wait around. Like, if there are deals to be made, and one of the reasons I bring that up is something that's going on. That's something that's going on in Sacramento a little bit as well. As the Kings lost again to the Lakers, and they're now 3 games under 500. And there was a report today from Sam Amick and Anthony Slater of The Athletic, and it basically was that, straight up, it was just that De'Aaron Fox, the pressure's kind of on De'Aaron Fox for the Warriors for the Kings to be good enough to where he's going to want to stay there. And the reason I bring that up as it relates to the Warriors is, as they take another loss, it's a situation where the Kings are looking at a lot of the same players that the Warriors are looking at. Not maybe Jimmy Butler, but they're looking at Cam Johnson, they're looking at Dorian Finney-Smith, they're looking at Kuzma, they're looking at a lot of the names that have been bandied about as far as the Warriors. Levine, even, although I don't think the Warriors are in a position to get Levine now because they would have to give up Wiggins and others to do it. But I think Cam Johnson specifically is a target that both of these teams have a significant amount of interest in. And with the Kings taking another loss and things starting to get a little bit weird, I feel like there could be a little bit of an arms race as it relates to the Kings maybe pushing the pace and the tempo to try and make a move that might prevent the Warriors from making a move.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I agree with it as well. Like I kind of said at the top of the show, and I know people kind of come in and out on the YouTube, but this was why I was a little bit antsy and wound up watching this game, because it felt very last year. Even with the win and the way things kind of closed out, it still felt very last year in terms of, hey, it's great that the best player you've ever had in franchise history, this once-in-a-lifetime guy, went on a heater, ended up scoring 31 on a night when he didn't really look like himself for the first 3 quarters all that much. And at the same time, had a couple bad decisions at the end, a couple fouls. Defense was good. Wiggins, TJD, Pods made some plays that were necessary, but also not the kind of game that we can expect every night from those guys, except maybe Wiggins on that side of the ball. There's been a lot of inconsistency in other areas. And so to that point, good win. Minnesota's had their own struggles. It's not easy to win in this league on the road. But also, if you want to be a team that has aspirations to maybe get to a conference finals or win at least a playoff series, I think you got to look at yourself in the mirror. I think you got to look outside the organization, and sooner, absolutely better than later. Not just for the reason, JD, of other teams like a Sacramento Kings might come in and make a move, or Oklahoma City that has all this draft stock might come and make a move. It's also, this team needs to be able to play some games together. I mean, it's been 2 games, really 1 1/4 now of Dennis Schroeder, and it's nice and comforting for the Warriors to have another ball handler out there and someone who can guide the offense when Steph's off the floor. But it doesn't just look like this seamless transition. Like, guys got to figure out how to play with Steph, even though he usually makes it easier on guards. It's not just a thing that you can flip the switch for everybody. And you are muted, my friend.
Now I'm not. Am I muted now?
Gotcha.
I'm not muted now. Okay. Yeah. All right. But you can hear me. Okay. Yeah. I was going through a little tech thing. I think we were connected, but not through the microphone initially. So yeah, not to like not to completely grind the show to a halt, but like as you were talking there, we were connected, but we were connected via my computer. And even though I was talking into the microphone, I think everybody was hearing me just based on the mic from the computer and not the actual mic. And so I did a little connection switch. It should be coming through the mic. It was an issue on my end here. I thought it was a default. And so you should be hearing me better now, actually.
You sound fantastic all the time. You sound good.
You should be, yeah, you should be hearing me better now. Yeah, I guess it sounded like I was distant because I'm like hugging this mic that's in front of me, but but the mic was not the proper, it was not the input on the stream. So it was, you were getting like, the guy talking at their computer screen level as opposed to now the full level there. Thank you, Larry. Much better. So yeah, quick little setting change here.
Shout out Austin Scott, by the way.
Well, Austin's the one that's like, dude, is your mic plugged in? And I'm like, yeah, it should be. And I thought we had something with like the mute. So I'm like, I'm going to mute this while I check it out. And then, yeah, I didn't unmute. Yeah, you sounded like you were underground. So yeah, imagine.
Maybe it's just me. I thought you sounded okay. I mean, you sound a little louder now and clearer, but I'm glad that everyone's bringing this to my attention. I was like, he sounds fine. Yeah, no, it's a total, like as soon as it was brought to the attention, there's, quick little, again, it's like, are you either have a mic plugged into your computer and you're talking in that mic, or it's going to sound great, or you don't have a mic plugged into your computer. So you're just talking to your computer speaker. And that's that. And so I was basically talking to my computer speaker, even though it looked like I was talking directly into this mic. But because of the setup that I have here, I was hearing it like it was perfect. Like I was hearing it loud and clear. So I couldn't tell that there was a difference. Anyway, we digress on that. All's well that ends well, baby.
But yeah, we're good here for the remainder of the program. So yeah, the long story short on that is, I think the Kings are getting almost desperate to make a move. I think Cam Johnson might be the best player they could get at this point in terms of trying to change things around. Again, we've discussed the Cam Johnson fit for the Warriors. I think Cam Johnson would be, I think he would be my number one target if I'm the Warriors, even above Jimmy Butler. I know I mentioned that to you and Pop a little bit yesterday. I mean, Jimmy Butler's still the best player, but what you would have to give up, and look, I mean, Wiggins tonight, like you're getting, like, I would love Jimmy Butler for the Warriors if you had Jimmy Butler and Wiggins, but you won't. You'll have Jimmy Butler or Wiggins, and you'll lose Kuminga. So again, I don't think that one's nearly as much of a no-brainer, but the main thing I wanted to get into is just the simple fact that there is other teams that are, I think, on the brink of being as desperate or more desperate than the Warriors to make a move. I think a third of the league is in on Cam Johnson, at least in terms of some level of interest. Like, don't wait and let that one pass. And if you do, I don't feel like he's going to be around here deep into January, or even still sitting around that first week of February before the deadline.
Yeah. Beam is desperate. Kings need Cam Johnson to send that beam into the sky. Well, look, Cam Johnson, wherever he goes, is going to help a lot. And I know that he probably isn't thought of widely as a star player, but he's the type of player that can be very good on a good team. And I think in the NBA, you kind of see at some point, especially on bad teams, that there are a lot of guys that can fill up the stat sheet if they want to. Like, that's how skilled a lot of these players are. And Patrick Beverley even had a game, I think, with the Sixers at some point last year, where he went for like 20, like high 20s of points. And everyone's like, oh, like, but he never really scores. Well, yeah, it doesn't mean he can't do it. Cam Johnson the other night, as now the guy in Brooklyn, had 33. I don't know how many players on the Warriors right now, today, could go for 33 if they're just kind of playing a game that's by and large meaningless. Obviously, Steph. Wiggins could do it. Buddy Hield could go on a hot streak, and I think Kuminga could probably do it. But for the most part, Cam Johnson is a better option offensively than a very high chunk of this roster, even if he's not going to be anything to an all-star type of player, and he's making, was it 20 mil? Like, that is a piece that could help instantly and for good for the rest of the season.
I'd give up Kuminga. I'd give up Moody. I'd give up whatever other salary filler that would be necessary to do it. I think you see tonight why, if you're the Warriors, you would really want to hang on to GP2. You wouldn't want him to necessarily. And here's the other thing. If you send GP2 to Brooklyn as part of that deal, he's just going to get rerouted somewhere else and probably wind up on a team that you're going to be contending with. And he's going to end up guarding Stephen Curry in big games down the stretch, or in the play-in tournament, or in the playoffs. Honestly, like, he's going to end up, if GP2 ends up being somebody you have to throw in, then GP2 is going to end up on another contender. Now, I get it. When you start looking at the different salary machinations, you may have to include Looney or Anderson or GP2 or Buddy Hield. I mean, it just, and I, there are different levels to be discussed as far as all of those players go. But I would, the Kuminga Moody's deal's tricky because you got to basically send out 5.8 because that's what he makes this year, but you have to take back the average of what he's going to be making on his new contract. So you have to take back $5 to $7 million more, but the Warriors can't do that because they're hard capped. So then they would have to send out even more money in the deal to get under the hard cap if Moody's included in any deal. So that can get a little bit convoluted and add to more players that would have to be going elsewhere. But again, I think some kind of a framework, Cam Johnson and a pick or two, and whatever other salary filler you need, because the Nets have been reported as a team that's interested in Kuminga. I think they need to take a really hard look at that. Cam Johnson's a shooter. He's a scorer. He does it efficiently. Like,
what else he can be, though? A three.
He can be, well, yeah, him and Wiggins can play together, and he can be a backup three, and he could be the backup three now. Like, it without a doubt. I mean, him and Wiggins can play together. He can come off the bench. You could start Draymond, and you could play Cam Johnson and Wiggins at the 2 at that point if you really wanted to. You could go TJD, Draymond, Cam Johnson, Wiggins, and Curry, and bring Schroeder off the bench. You could go back to that lineup that, only with Kuminga not a part of it, that everybody seemed to love, and be rangy and length and have defense and have shooting. So I'm high on Cam Johnson, but the overarching point on that is don't wait around, because I don't think he's going to be around to be had for as long as maybe people think.
I agree with that. I mean, the fact that there's rumors getting flooded out every single day, and I know rumors are just rumors, but there's a lot of teams attached to rumors, and when that happens, it means that conversations are happening. And by the way, the Warriors themselves got the ball rolling on a lot of this with Dennis Schroeder getting him December 15th. So I think that kind of sets off a little bit of an alarm with people sometimes, and not that the Dennis Schroeder coming to Golden State for D'Anthony Melton's contract and some second rounders is like a blockbuster move by any means, but it does send a message when the Western Conference is tight in particular, and you see one of the Western Conference teams that's very much in the mix right now already thinking about, okay, how do we get better right now? Yeah,
I think there are a lot of teams that are thinking that way. So more from the YouTube chat. Robert, it'll be interesting to see if they can build on this win or if they'll go on another losing streak. Yet remains to be seen. We touched on that. Big win, feel good win from our buddy Rebel DeSounds, even though they had to work hard for it. Yeah, without a doubt. Pods look like he did last year tonight. EB here. TJD taking it personal, causing havoc. No more standing around. Trace Jackson-Davis was terrific in this game. Finished tonight. He was finishing at the basket tonight. He was taking it aggressively, and he was finishing it at the basket. should Trace Jackson Davis go back to being the starting five moving forward? It's so funny. I feel like every night, Greg, we have some conversation because Steve Kerr changes the lineup every night. Every night, we almost could have one of these conversations where it's, should Kuminga be the 4 for the rest of the year? Nope, he's not going to be. Should TJD be the starting 5 for the rest of the year? Nope, he's not going to be. Should Schroeder start next to Curry? I mean, he might actually, but I for some reason, I mean, depending upon who the Warriors trade for, maybe he ends up being a super sub 6th man at some point here in the next month to 6 weeks. But let's keep it to TJD tonight. The Warriors did play their best basketball early when TJD was the starting center.
Absolutely. They absolutely did. And TJD needs to do something that I think Jonathan Kuminga actually does very well, which is just deciding to get above the rim. Kuminga draws a lot of fouls when he decides to get above the rim, or he gets a lot of finishes when he decides to get above the rim. TJD is 6'10". Looney is a really smart player, and he has played much better basketball this year. And you know, I'm a Looney head, but he, offensively or defensively, does not play above the rim. That has never been his game. He's an incredible rebounder. He's a smart defender. He does not play above the rim. Trace Jackson Davis needs to be a rim protector and get into that mindset defensively. And offensively, he needs to do what he was doing tonight, which was, okay, Rudy Gobert's in front of you. Let me try to dunk it down. It worked in some cases. Other times it might not, and he's going to get fouled, and he's not a great free throw shooter, but you get people in foul trouble. Make them think about it. Don't reward the defense by shying away from contact or not embracing that. I mean, that's something that I was taught from a very young age, and I am a whole foot shorter than Trace Jackson Davis. So we never played the same kind of game, but it is just one of those fundamental basketball markers right there. TJD can be very effective for this team if he gets into the mindset on both sides of the ball, getting his arms above the rim.
Yeah, he did that tonight, and I think you're spot on as far as that piece of analysis goes. A couple more here in the YouTube chat, and then I want to get into Stephen Curry's the rotation change, because Steve changed it mid-game tonight, and this is one thing that I hope is completely gone for good, and that is the rotation that Steve had been using for Steph here over these last couple of weeks. I don't think it was working for the team. I don't think it was working for Steph, if you really got the truth serum in him. So we'll touch on that coming up. GSW Vera, Warriors needed that win in the worst way. What that made me think of is just how ugly Thursday night was in Memphis, and the blowout, and the one price of admission thing for tonight when you get embarrassed the way that the Warriors got embarrassed is you better come out and compete your ass off from the beginning. And the Warriors competed their ass off from the beginning tonight. And so that, if that doesn't happen after a game like Thursday in Memphis, then you have to start looking at maybe there's some bigger problems and some guys that maybe aren't, maybe are letting go of the rope a little bit, or don't think that this season is totally worth fighting for at this particular point in time. So I think that's a very good sign, win or lose. And again, if the Warriors had lost, it would have been a disaster on top of a calamity. I mean, it just would have been, I cannot even imagine losing another big lead. This one would have been the biggest of them all, that they actually would have lost a game while having the lead. It didn't happen, but the competitive nature that they started the game with defensively showed that getting embarrassed, they felt that and adjusted to it at the beginning of this game tonight.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, I know Colin Cowherd always is a very polarizing figure for a lot of people in the sports media world, or not in the sports media world, but rather those who watch a lot of sports media, consume a lot of sports media. And he always has one of his rules. Usually I hear him reference it in football, but when you get embarrassed on national television, he really likes that in terms of a betting standpoint for the next week, especially with good teams. Now, if it's the Jacksonville Jaguars, maybe not as much. the Warriors are trying not to be the Jacksonville Jaguars. We would have been having a more Jaguars conversation had they lost this game tonight, JD. But maybe they're a little bit more like the Washington Commanders. I mean, it's a bad example because they're kind of a young upstart team, but you get what I'm saying in terms of like they could be a lower end playoff team right now, and they could be in the mix for sure. That's a good sign that they responded to the fact that they got embarrassed, because remember last year we saw the back-to-back gutless efforts. Was it New Orleans, Toronto coming into town early January?
Yeah, Toronto and then New Orleans.
Ugh.
Yep. Yeah, bad. Really, really bad. Really, really ugly. But no, that doesn't happen here. And look, much like last year, the Warriors are going to have this long stretch of home games right around New Year's and at the beginning of the new year to try and make a push. They did not do that last year. They're going to have to do that coming up this year, and we'll see if they can stabilize their season a little bit, get it back closer to what it was when they were 12-3 than where it looked like they were heading. Again, they're not getting any schedule favors, but that's fine. I mean, you got to go out and you got to compete and you got to win some of these games here. Tony Smith, our issue is offense. Defense was great. Yeah, the issue still is offense. And again, down the stretch, you get Steph Curry doing what Curry did there at the end, and it just, I mean, it's a complete game changer. I mean, Warriors are up 2 with 3:30 to go, and Curry hits a 3. Then he hits a couple of free throws, and then he hits another 3, and then he ends up with another 3. So it just, I mean, it and more free throws. Like it was Steph Curry bringing it home tonight. But as you look at the overall numbers here, and Steph ends up with 31 and a plus 20, you look at the number, TJD gave them a lift tonight, an efficient 15 points on 8 shots in this one. Pajemski gave him an efficient 12, right? 5 of 9, did other things. Kuminga got his 11, but it took him 11 shots. Buddy Hield got him 11. There really was not great offense played by the Warriors tonight. They had enough from TJD and Pajemski and Buddy Hield and Kuminga got to the free throw line enough, and then Curry carried it home. Tonight's a night where you move forward, and it's just they got to get Schroeder going. They got to, get Wiggins going. For as great defensively as he was, he didn't have it tonight offensively. And I do think they still need to continue to look outside the organization for even more offense, in addition to the Schroeder acquisition. That's the overarching big picture takeaway there. This team still doesn't have enough offense.
Steph Curry plus 20 tonight.
That's it. I mean,
again, I'm not trying to be a downer after
the game.
They needed, but they are incredibly, incredibly Steph dependent, and that is what makes this year's team similar to last year's. They defend better. They got a younger roster. Not enough consistency, said very well by Estimated.
They beat Dallas late. Why? Because Steph Curry went off back in November. I mean, that's what it was. They beat Minnesota 2 weeks ago at Chase Center in the rematch of the little 2-game mini series. And why did they beat Minnesota late? They beat Minnesota late because Curry and Buddy Hield combined to make 12 threes, and Jonathan Kuminga had 20 points efficiently in that game with a lot of it at the rim. I mean, it was like you win that game because of defense, quality defense. You give up 106, you make life difficult, but you win that game because Steph did his thing, Buddy Hield did his thing, and Jonathan Kuminga, they were all three efficient. And so that has not happened. Like when they were winning early, it was Buddy Hield and it was Steph. And when they won some of these other games, it was Kuminga. But you don't have it. Wiggins has been somebody that's been there, but you haven't had enough that you can count on with regularity, especially down the stretch in a lot of these games. So tonight is not the formula for being successful in the long term offensively.
Yeah, I'd call it the anti-formula as far as a win can go. You'll take it. You got to take everything you can get. Were the Timberwolves also 14-12 coming into tonight?
They are 12-12 now, I believe. Oh, actually, no, I'm sorry. I was looking at the wrong. What was I looking at here?
Yes, they were. They're now 14-13.
Yeah, they are 14-13. Sorry, I had the wrong day up there.
So yeah, like these games, winning games like this matters when, seeds 3 through 8, for all we know, could be incredibly packed coming down to the final couple of days of the regular season. But it's also like, okay, let's just look at the Warriors in a realistic lens. I think we saw some good things tonight. I like the defensive effort. I think Trace Jackson Davis and Podziemski both having good games was a really positive sign. I also think it's realistic to not expect that moving forward. And maybe some other guys are the ones that chip in. But again, goes back to what Rebel DeSounds was getting to, what Estimated was getting to. You need Steph to play really well, and then you need some semblance of consistency around that. And offensively, it just hasn't been there.
No, it has not been there. And again, how do the Warriors fix it? Is it fixable with the current roster? I think Schroeder helps it. They still clearly haven't figured out how to get the most out of Schroeder. It's fine. It's been a week, but I think one area in which they can get more out of Steph Curry, and one area by which I think they can get more out of Dennis Schroeder, ways to do it, is I think by changing Stephen Curry's rotation. And I like the second half going back to play the first 9 minutes and then take a 6-7 minute break and then play the last 8 minutes, roughly. That to me is the move. I've been out completely only because I know Steph doesn't like it. And look, Steph is open-minded when Steve Kerr comes to him and says, hey, I'd like to try some things. And if he doesn't like it, he'll say he doesn't like it, but he also has shown an ability to roll with it through the years for a short period of time. And then if it doesn't work, they huddle up again and they determine that it doesn't work and you move forward from there. But the whole play 6, rest 3, play 3, play 6, rest 3, play 3, that in every quarter, that ain't it. I mean, Steph needs to be able to get his rhythm go. I also like the fact that I think Schroeder should be the first sub out between him and Steph. I don't like, you don't start the game, you get 6 minutes in, you take Steph out. Like, no, you let Steph play the first 9 minutes, you take Schroeder out like 6 minutes in, give him a 3-4 minute break, play Podziemski maybe with Steph for a couple of minutes there. And then you bring Schroeder back in for Steph and you let Schroeder run the end of the quarter and bridge the second and fourth quarters into the first and third, start of the second and fourth.
Okay, so I agree with you, as I tend to do on a lot of these things, but I will offer you one counter. So first half, I agree. Don't make Steph like one of the first subs. Let him play it out. But in the fourth quarter, and the reason I'm thinking this is because of a Dubs OT YouTube only we did in the spring last year for a game the Warriors lost in Minnesota. And essentially, we came on here and said, Steve Kerr waited too long to put Steph back in the game. They had to call multiple timeouts, and he finally came back in. I don't hate the fourth quarter, have him out there to start it, and then let him rest a little bit if he needs to, and come back in and close the game. For the first half, I think it should go back to the old way. I do think there's a devil's advocate argument to be made on the fourth quarter, because what we've seen with the last couple of years is with the Warriors and the leads that they're able to build up and even having their vintage third quarters sometimes, the beginning of the fourth quarter is when things really start to crumble for them sometimes, and it's sort of the beginning of the end. So for that reason, I don't hate having Steph start the fourth quarter, grab a little bit of rest, and play the last 6 if he can. Now, I think there's a discussion to be had. I could be talked into it depending on the night, the matchup, how many minutes he's played, etc. But it's not something I necessarily hate as like a rule when I see how they can protect some of these fourth quarters while preserving Steph's energy.
Yeah, for me, it's too choppy. It's too, like, Steph wants one rest.
Yeah.
He said that he wants one rest per half. And it used to be play the whole first and third quarters, and then he would rest for the first 5 to 6 minutes of the second and fourth quarter, till sometime the Warriors would be up so much he wouldn't even come back in the game. And that used to piss off Warrior fans because he couldn't come back in and pad his stats, even though the Warriors would be up by 20 or 30 at that point. But to me, it's get him a sub. And yeah, it might make it a little more tricky as to when you put him back in. But that's why Steve Kerr gets paid the big bucks, and he's going to have to measure it, and there's going to have to be games he chases harder than others. I think it sets up Schroeder. I like Schroeder at the Schroeder-Kuminga combo. I would go when Steph's not on the floor. I would go with Schroeder and Kuminga, especially if both are going to be coming off the bench. I would have that be my start of the second and fourth quarter. Run a bunch of pick and roll with those two guys. Let those two basically own it. I'd maybe even put Buddy Hield out there.
I was going to ask. That was going to be my next question.
As with some shooting, because you've got two guys that are going to, so Buddy gets some of the gravity there. So I don't know. I think that's the way I would do it, as far as I know Steve likes Looney and Kuminga together. I know, TJD's back in the starting, so maybe there's a Looney component to that as well, where Looney's out there with Kuminga more. But I like Schroeder and Kuminga together, assuming they can eventually just get on the same page and figure out to play. I know there are people that say Kuminga's better when he's out there with Steph. I mean, who isn't? Or he's not going to take as many bad shots maybe when he's out there with Steph, because Steph is somebody that he'll be deferential to. Hey, I'm not going to take this shot because the ball might end up in Steph's hands, where if he's out on the court with others, he may think I'm the best player on the court. I've got carte blanche to shoot as much as I want. And then he takes some bad shots. So I think you have to weigh that. Either way, one sub per half for Steph Curry, I think is a winning combination. I like Kuminga off the bench for the time that he's remaining on this team, if he's not included in a deal. I like Schroeder as the first sub out, and then he comes in almost as if he's coming off the bench, even though he's not, because he's starting for Steph Curry, and then Steph Curry goes to the bench. You got to play Steph longer. You want him to get into a rhythm at the beginning of the game, and you want him to get into a rhythm at the end of halves and games. And the best way to do it is a longer leash at the beginning and a long stretch at the end. Allow him a little bit of a ramp up to feel the game.
I mean, look, the Steph one sub per half has worked and has a lot of pluses. We've seen it on display, and I think you just outlined really well a lot of the reasons why that's a good thing. I'm just saying that I'm not closing the door to the idea of having him start the fourth in certain times, because of what I've seen. We're about 27 games, so we're pretty much just under 1/3 of the mark in the season. If I'm talking about the last 2.5 regular seasons I've seen of Warriors basketball, I'm not necessarily opposed to the idea of having Steph start some fourths with the way they have gotten a little sloppy with some of the leads. If they got a lead and it's a chance to build some momentum at the start of the fourth quarter, I could see that as a real plus. The old cliche, basketball's a game of runs. Yeah, well, sometimes when you're protecting an 11-point lead going into the fourth and your opposition makes their run to start the fourth, and then Steph comes back in and it's like, hey, don't turn it over because you're up 3 now and it's a one-possession game. That's when I've seen the Warriors get into a little trouble. So in terms of the rhythm and managing his personal preferences in the one rest, I think you outlined it really well. And I could see Schroeder, Kuminga, Hield as a really good second unit, try to keep things afloat in the non-Steph minutes. I'm looking at this from the lens of they're still really Steph dependent right now. Mm-hmm. We have a lot left to see of Schroeder. And for that, I am not as adverse to the idea of seeing number 30 out there to start a fourth quarter when that could be the difference between things getting really dicey in crunch time and things being a little more stable.
Final couple of minutes here. It is John Dickinson and Greg Silver. It's Dubs OT with JD. YouTube only edition here on a Saturday night. Big Warriors win. I think one of the big early season wins. Although is it really early in the season anymore? 27 games, as I've laid out here the last couple. 27 is basically the 1/3 mark of the season.
We are entering the second trimester.
Yes, we are entering the second trimester as of Monday night. When the Warriors are back in action at home against Indiana. And Indiana's played better basketball. They've won 3 in a row as of now to get from 10-15 to 13-15, and just kind of looking around at the scores a little bit in the standings. The Suns got beat tonight by Detroit at home. I'm looking to see who played in that one. So no Booker for the Suns. Yeah, no Booker in that one, but they did have Beal and they did have Durant. And so, Detroit wins in Phoenix. So you look at the standings now, and we'll do a quick fun with numbers. Also, the Suns now have joined, believe it or not, Sacramento as the two teams that are on the outside looking in right now of even the play-in tournament. The Suns are 11th at 14-13. So they're a game off where the Warriors are right now at 15-12. And that is good enough to put them 11th. The Warriors went from 10th to 7th with their win tonight at 15-12, but they're in a tie. Percentage points, Denver has the advantage over the Warriors. So right now, the 5th seed is 4 over. So you're a half game out of 5th if you're the Warriors as you sit in 7th, but you're also a game out of 11th, meaning you're not in the play-in tournament. And if you add Sacramento to that, you're 3 games from being 12th in the Western Conference. As OKC and Memphis, along with Houston and Dallas, have separated themselves for the time being, although we know from covering the Warriors, Greg, that you can feel like you've got some separation if you're 8-9 over and all of a sudden you have a bad couple of weeks as the Warriors have, and you go from maybe the top 2, 3, 4 all the way down to in that 7-11 range.
I'm looking at the standings update right now from the NBA, and not that this is necessarily talked about heavily out west for us, but right now, dude, how about the Pistons? With that win, they would be 10th in the play-in tournament. Kind of impressive after the season they just had. Like, I gotta say, that popped out to me.
Yeah, 10th and at 12-17. They've moved in front of Brooklyn at Brooklyn currently sitting at 11-17 in the West. Looking at my notes here, Greg, before we do a quick fun with numbers and call it a night. And Greg, I appreciate you joining me here for the YouTube onlys. I know that's going to be kind of part of the plan here moving forward. The YouTube onlys, hopefully you'll be available for and able to jump in and keep this thing going. Triple digits in terms of the viewers tonight for a good chunk of the program. So really appreciate everybody watching here on YouTube as the Warriors got a big win, 113-103. Kind of going through my notes here. We talked about the De'Aaron Fox stuff and Cam Johnson. 10 teams have inquired, according to the report that I saw today on Cam Johnson. Cavs, Grizzlies, Kings, Lakers, Magic, Mavs, Nuggets, Thunder. My God, you imagine if the Mavs or the Thunder got Cam Johnson, the Rockets, and of course the Warriors. And there is some thought that, hey, Brooklyn really is going to want to hit the tank at some point. So that also might enhance the speed at which the Nets look to continue to tear things down a little bit. And of course, the big story of the week, this is something that's been out there at different points, but the Warriors more willing than they have been in the past to include younger players, whether it's Kuminga, Moody, or Podziemski. Throw Trace Jackson Davis in there in deals based on some of the struggles that the Warriors have had late there. So some final thoughts for you, Greg, here, and then we'll do a quick fun with numbers and we'll end this thing.
Yeah, final thoughts. Good to be with you. Good to spend a little Saturday night talking about a win. Warriors, I'm not soured on in terms of thinking that they can't do anything this season, but I do think that it is similar to last year in terms of the Western Conference being packed. Every game's going to count. They got to take advantage of being in their own building coming up here. Christmas Day game against the Lakers will be big, and we'll keep talking about it. We'll keep monitoring it. These things don't happen. I say it all the time, but these like YouTube streams don't happen without this whole party hanging out here late with us. So appreciate you all. And a couple of non-Warrior notes I just kind of bookmarked. That's right, Alex. Cal Golden Bears 12-1 tonight, women's basketball.
Okay. All right.
Beat
I like
Fordham. And then on the other side of the state, Juju Watkins and the USC Trojans went and beat UConn. So I look at Juju, and I don't know when she would declare for the draft or anything, but if she could be a future Golden State Valkyrie, one can dream.
Yeah, there's going to have to be some they haven't announced what pick the Valkyries are getting, right?
It's 5, I think.
Okay. Officially 5? There's gonna have to be some I don't think she's getting to 5.
No, I'm saying if she stays another year in college.
Oh, okay.
Like,
Gotcha.
It's like the equivalent of bag for flag.
So get the number 1 pick next year. Got it.
Yeah, what would we call that? Poo-poo for Juju?
I gotcha. Yeah, I gotcha. So you're saying I don't get the impression Joe Lacob wants to tank a year.
Maybe they won't tank. Maybe it's just the expansion struggles, bumps in the road. All right. Let me be a romantic for a second.
No, it would be great. I know a couple people had mentioned the sad news of the day, and in baseball, obviously we're talking Warriors, but Ricky Henderson passing away at the age of 65. I mean, just that one hits me. I mean, Ricky Henderson was a part of my childhood. I mean, in the formative years of just loving baseball and growing up in Northern California. I have mentioned many times that 1989 was a huge year as a kid for me to get into sports. Whether it was going to my first NBA game in Sacramento, going to my first baseball game. I went to my first Giants and A's game that year. Giants game at Candlestick, A's game at the Coliseum. And, then they end up playing in the World Series. The 49ers won the Super Bowl that year. So growing up in Northern California, that was like, hey, I like sports. This is fun. But Ricky Henderson was a major part of that. I mean, he was just, the dude was just box office in every sense of the word. And that one really hurt to see. I mean, the all-time stolen bases leader, from the greatest leadoff hitter of all time to just unbelievable athlete to, he holds the records for runs and stolen bases and just, and swag and cool. I mean, he was just unstoppable. He was just, you'd walk him and he'd be on third base because he'd steal 2 bags. You pitch to him, he'd hit the ball over the wall because that's what he did. And he was somebody that, the snatch catch and swag and telling players on the diamond what he was going to do before he would do it. He was just the epitome of cool. And, to see him around in the last few years over at the Coliseum and Ricky Henderson Field at the Coliseum, they named the field after him. It was just too young and just it really hurt me. It was part of my childhood just as a sports fan was just how awesome he was and obviously a true Oakland legend as well in a time where Oakland is no more in terms of professional sports on the men's side. So yeah, it's tough stuff, sad stuff. And we're obviously going to talk more about it. I'm going to be in on the morning show on Monday with Dieter Kurtenbach filling in. I know you and Pop on Monday are going to be talking a lot about Ricky Henderson as well. So feel free to share a couple thoughts on that and we'll shut her down.
Yeah, and I think that was really well said by you. And as I get older and more involved in sports, I'm going to have figures that I grew up with and really impacted me that are going to leave us, and it's going to be tough. And, by the time I was old enough to become a sports fan, Ricky Henderson was well out of the league. So my version of Ricky Henderson was the fact that he was already a legend. And so I got to learn about everything retroactively. And this isn't going to surprise a lot of people on YouTube. Basketball and football were probably the main sports that I followed growing up in terms of the leagues. MLB, I wasn't super locked in terms of the league landscape, and there's so many games all the time. So I would follow it loosely, but really it was A's and Giants that I paid attention to. And so A's, I lived the first part of my life in Oakland, and so always had a special place in my heart for them. And seeing what they went through and leaving Oakland this year was really tough. It was not a fun summer to just kind of watch that happen, but see people like Ricky Henderson out of the Coliseum, and Greg Papa, my midday partner now, had an amazing monologue about going to the Coliseum for the last time. So I'm really looking forward to getting to talk about that. And then for the Giants, it was my other local team, and a lot of my extended family, it meant a lot to them, the success they had. So always followed those two teams really closely, and the history of that as well. So Ricky Henderson, the fact that he came to Oakland when he was 2 years old, was an Oakland Tech graduate, just like Marshawn Lynch eventually was. The athletes who grow up in Oakland and then get to come back and play, you can see the kind of impact that the city has on them and vice versa. So just by having a little bit of Oakland in my roots, and I'm always going to appreciate that. And we're going to try to get some really great guests to talk about it too on Monday, which is going to be Papa's last show before he takes off for the holidays. So really looking forward to just hearing a lot of stories, hearing it from people that got to experience in real time, and just kind of soak it in as a little bit of a younger guy here.
Yeah, just one of the all-time greats. I think you could make the case you could make the case for somebody, in the early 40s as I am, that he's, up there among the greatest players in any sport that I've ever seen. Just, in terms of just the stolen bases, power, speed, defense, hitting for average, and then just a hell of a personality to boot, and a big part of those ace teams that I thought Sandy Alderson, he said it well in his statement. He said he traded him away and then brought him back more times than he traded him away. And that was kind of the Ricky experience throughout his time with the A's. So yeah, some truly sad news earlier today. Let's close it out here with some numbers here. Warriors ended the 3-game losing streak tonight, so they're 15-12, back to 8-7 on the road. They lost 5 in a row on the road. They lead the season series 2-1 over Minnesota. These two teams set to play one more time in January the 15th, again at Target Center. Warriors 16th different starting lineup tonight, and we'll see how long that one lasts. Probably not long, with Draymond coming back at some point, maybe as soon as Monday. But the defensive tone was clearly set from Steve Kerr. And then the 17th clutch game, Warriors 8-9. It's been up and down. I know I shared with you the note. You talk about clutch games. The Warriors have played 17. We were talking about the Kings a little bit earlier. By contrast, I think it's interesting to point out for people that the Warriors in clutch games, my God, and 8-9 is obviously not good. The Kings have played 18, and they lost one today to the Lakers. They are 6-12 in clutch games in 18. So they've played 18 of them, and they've lost 2/3 of their clutch games, and it's at this point the difference in the two teams really. At this point, 3 games separating in the standings, and 2.5 games in terms of the overall record in the clutch games. And, that's a team that would say that they have in De'Aaron Fox and DeMar DeRozan, 2 of the most clutch players in the league in the last 3 years. And they can't seemingly figure out how to win a game down the stretch. But 8-9 are the Warriors there. We talked about Stephen Curry, 4th double-double of the season, 31 points, 10 assists. fourth 30-point game for Steph as well. And when the Warriors have needed it, he's really delivered it in some of these games to finish off wins. TJD, 19th start of the year. TJD was terrific, 15 points on the 7 of 8 shooting. Kyle Anderson, first start for the Warriors tonight. Thought that was interesting. Somebody that hadn't been playing a lot, but no Draymond. He gets his first start of the year. And the Warriors are 2-1 without Draymond in 3 games. They've beaten the Rockets and the Timberwolves. They lost to Denver in the game that they had the 6-point lead in the final couple of minutes, and probably should have won in Denver going back a couple of weeks ago. Greg, thank you, my friend. We will talk to you soon, and I will talk to you on Monday as we'll be crossing over with you and Papa 10-2, and I'll be in with Dieter 6-10. So
you in studio Monday?
TBD. Full disclosure, TBD.
Still, fair enough.
Possible. Still trying to work out the logistics of that. But for Greg and I'm JD, and for everybody else, appreciate everybody in the YouTube chat. Excellent stuff tonight. I'll talk to you tomorrow on 49ers pre and post game as well with Adam Copeland as the 49ers take on the Dolphins. And then again, Monday, 6 a.m. with Dieter Kurtenbach. So we'll talk to you then. Warriors win at 113-103 for KNBR, the sports leader.